Hello and welcome to SIWI Corner. My name is Georgette and I work for the Stockholm International Water Institute. Every day this week we'll be hosting SIWI Corner right here in the auditorium, so you can join us at 1 o'clock here or online. And we've been asking, what are we getting wrong with water and how do we get it right? A UN report projected that by 2050 we'll have 2.5 billion more people living in cities. So we need to rethink our cities so that they can cope with this increased demand on water whilst building resilience to extreme water events and increasing water scarcity. Which is why I'm happy to have joining me today Panchali and Louise from the City Water Resilience Approach. Louise working for Arup and Panchali for SIWI. So, what is it that we're getting wrong with cities when it comes to water?
I think one of the main things that we need to change in our approach is moving from a separate systems approach to looking at a holistic level. We need to view water, sanitation, wastewater within the wider scope of all the interconnected systems within a city. And this goes for not only looking at the systems within the city, but we need to also look at how a city sits within its catchment, sits within its region as well, so that water issues are a kind of spread across that entire catchment, and we need to be able to understand that so that they become a hub for our decision-making processes.
Yes, I think Louise raised a very critical and important point of how cities are actually looking at managing water services and the water systems. And I think there is a more push needs to be done to really connect what cities can do to protect the water sources that it really draws water from for its water supply and services. And I think here I want to bring importance of the river system, the river and city connect, where rivers are actually an integral part of urban system, and they provide enormous ecosystem values for cities through water services, through flood control, navigation, waterways. And I think urban planners, urban water utilities really need to take proactive actions to be able to protect these water sources, be it through urban water utilities, integrating water tariffs with polluters pay, with integrating source water protection, or urban planners integrating river-sensitive urban water master plans and river planning. So I think this is more needed at the city level.
Okay, so it sounds like one of the things we're getting wrong there is our relationship to the water, both as people in a city, but as a city to its water resources. How has that been changing?
So as people start to live in larger urban centres, what we're often seeing is a disconnect from people and their water systems. People no longer necessarily see the source of where their water comes from, and they also don't see the effects of their water use or its effects on the environment. So we see this disconnect, and this emerges in a number of different ways, but particularly around willingness to pay for water services, provision, water supply from our taps, and sanitation, especially in Europe, is something we often take for granted. So we see this disconnect there.
Yes, and here I would also like to raise on the importance of how cities can work with water governance. We talk a lot about how we can improve water management through water infrastructure. Huge investments are made in cities around that, but we pay least an interest in terms of how water governance can really create the enabling environment to facilitate those water infrastructure, be it through policy, through planning. And I think a lot needs to be done across different levels on that.
Okay, so we need to maybe rethink then how, when it comes to urban water planning, and so what would that new or transformed planning look like? Who do we need to include? How do we include them?
I think one of the key things we need to think about is inclusion of other groups, so moving away from perhaps traditional planning practices where you're looking at municipal authorities and fewer inclusion of community grassroots groups or youth organizations as well. And particularly, I think the inclusion of youth is something that we need to consider, as they are going to make up the majority of the inhabitants of our cities as we go to 2050 to 2100. And I think what we also need to consider when we talk about our cities of the future is we're not talking about new cities, or in very few cases, we're not talking about completely new cities where we're going to have flying cars. We're thinking about how we can adapt and evolve our existing homes, how we can make them future-proof as well. And education and inclusion of youth, and on water issues and around water resilience, is really important. Some of the work we've recently done with the Living with Water Partnership in Hull in the United Kingdom really emphasised that theme, and some of the action they've taken there is to develop a Living with Water curriculum, so going into schools and actually teaching about the benefits and the opportunities that can come from implementing water resilience, as well as the development of an education centre that can help provide skills, develop opportunities around livelihoods that are related to water resilience. So it's no longer seen as a threat where you're only seeing water scarcity or flooding, and instead it becomes an opportunity for new skills and opportunities.
Yes, and on inclusion, I think it's very interesting and also very important, but very complex often to work with. Working with the Water and Sanitation Department at SIWI, I think we are really pushing forward to look into how we can really integrate inclusion in water and sanitation services. One example I can share is the study that SIWI is conducting. Our team in Latin America is looking into sanitation in public spaces. Cities are really paying a lot of attention how you can improve public sanitation. This is where it's really important to understand the needs of different groups, because when we talk of sanitation facilities in public spaces, the need for women users will be very different from an adult male, or be it from, say for example, having unisex toilet might not be feasible for those LGBT communities, and also looking into differently abled people and the low mobility, they might need more assistance for this kind of facilities. And it's really important to focus on how we can integrate this aspect and solutions to provide guidance to cities to achieve the SDG 6 goals, and also to ensure that the human rights to water and sanitation is ensured. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it is complex, as you said, and that's where that education piece becomes so important, of getting that valuing of water sort of intrinsic from a much younger age. And when we talk about this year, for example, the UN's International Youth Day focus was on intergenerational sort of collaboration and solidarity. How was that look on a city scale?
I think that has been a great breakthrough with that initiative that was taken by UN, because often we talk about this intergenerational divide. We don't talk about much of these exchanges that needs to be across this generation. On one side, when you see youth generating new and innovative solutions, ideas, driving campaigns, clean cities campaign, fighting against pollution of rivers, solid waste management in cities. On the other hand, we also need to see that they need that platform to upscale those initiatives and solutions. And for that, the generations who are actually the older generation sitting on the higher up table in decision making needs to have this dialogue, and they need to provide this platform for the youth to be involved more actively in the decision making and share the ideas and solutions.
To add to that, I think, as you said, we need to work more closely with youth groups and with our kind of existing structures when it comes to urban planning. And an example of that we've had recently was while doing city water resilience assessments in Rwanda, was engaging with the young water professional organizations that exist there. So it's very much led by a young professionals body to ensure that it's youth inclusion is not just a kind of tick box exercise. It is led by the people that we are developing these actions for, and that we're creating a sustainable future that has youth inclusion at the heart of it.
And I guess a fundamental aspect of successful youth participation is an enabling environment. How do we achieve an enabling environment in for example, urban planning?
I would like to share entry points that we can look into. One thing that in our team we really look into when we are organizing capacity building facilitative workshops, strengthening programs around water and sanitation in countries and municipalities, we try to engage a lot with youth. One recent example I can share is we had conducted this water and sanitation bottleneck analysis, more looking into climate risk in Paraguay. where we had actually engaged with a lot of youth organizations. They driving it as facilitators, moderators, rapporteurs in those sessions. And they can contribute a lot to those discussions going on in each of these tables around water and sanitation, urban water supply. So I think there could be different entry points that we can look into. I think how there could be meaningful participation that can be integrated more at the policy and planning level to have participatory frameworks and tools that can integrate, not just talking about youth, but also we have been talking about throughout the week around women's involvement in water discussions, be it through the network that SIWI leads around Women in Water Diplomacy Network. I think this is something very crucial to look into different entry points and drive these actions to make it more reality.
Absolutely, some very good tips for anyone listening there of how we can make those environments. And I was wondering, Louise, with the education piece that you mentioned of the importance of sort of getting in early, as it were, how do we then carry that through the generations to come, or the generation as they get older?
So, as I mentioned, the Living with Water curriculum, the example that we've got from the United Kingdom, that's targeting primary school aged kids, but we need to make sure that that isn't kind of just at one level and then it doesn't continue. So other actions that have come out of that is the potential for the creation of apprenticeships. So for school leavers, that there are job opportunities in this sphere. Also linking to local academic partners and universities, so sponsoring PhDs in this area, so that children perhaps that have grown up in the area can continue developing those skills all the way through their academic career. And then we need to ensure that we have links between local business, local water partners, and then linking back to these education centres so that the cycle can continue.
Absolutely, and I think that also really highlights the point that when we're talking about youth in this context, they're not just citizens of a city, they could be future colleagues in the water sector, future decision takers, so it does really make a big difference to get them sort of on board with how they value water, especially the water they maybe don't see that's further upstream or downstream, as you mentioned. If we wanted to say one last thing to the room, do you have a call to action, something you want to tell people to remember when next time they think about cities and waters, or they open the tap at home, or they see a river flow by?
Yes, I think we have been talking a lot about what cities need to do, right? I mean, what if cities act and the countries, they don't act at all? What if the global communities really don't provide those kind of opportunities for cities around financing, investments, and capacity development? I think it's very important how we align the local water actions with the national commitments and strategies, and also with the global agendas, the synergies that needs to be created with the SDGs, with the Paris Agreement, and also the SEDI framework for disaster risk reduction. How can cities be more involved, and how can you provide those platforms? And this is where I really want to make a call to all the international water community present at the Water Week, is to join forces. And I think in different sessions I have seen, we have been working in different regions with cities on resilience, water resilience, climate resilience, but we need to act together, and we need to do it today to make it water resilience a reality, from concept to reality, and provide those guidance to cities and help them in their pathway.
Yes. Absolutely, and I think I speak for both of you when I say you would be happy for people to reach out to you, either online or catch you after this talk to discuss the city water resilience approach, amongst other things. So please do feel free to reach out to Louise and Panchali if you'd love to hear more about what we've been talking about today. As we said, the cities we live in now will be the same cities we have in 2050, but there's going to be much more pressure on them. And we've also heard how water does play a fundamental role in the cities, but how cities play a fundamental role in the health of water and other natural resources. This week's theme of valuing water, if we can think about the water we necessarily don't see, especially in cities and urban environments, then we're going to be able to make these cities of the future more resilient and safe, prosperous, and for everyone. So please do join us again tomorrow. We'll be discussing innovation in water and outside. Thank you.
Thank you so much.